Well, tomorrow marks the end of 2018, and the day after tomorrow is the first day of 2019. Now, most of us look forward to changing the date on the calendar, to putting up those new calendars, to turning that page to see all those empty spots in January. We even like writing that new date on our checks. Well, for those of us who are dinosaurs and still write checks, we like to see it on our phones. Anything else that includes the year, it's fun to see that new date. And the idea of a new year is refreshing and exciting, and that feeling of getting to begin again. And as we ride planet Earth, we begin another circle around the sun. Now, we look forward to the new year. But if years could be put in a bottle, I believe we would discover a list of ingredients. We would discover the list of ingredients from year to year looks, well, pretty much the same. Because each year, well, brings birth and death, sorrow, success, failure, work, family, friends, and the progression of life and aging as we have come to know it. The new year is something like putting out a product and calling it new because it has a new label. Nothing on the inside is new, just the label. And like shopping, most of us are on to that trick. As a result, some days we get up feeling as though we're doing the same stuff on a different day. Same old becomes the answer when people are asking how we're doing. And when that happens too often, we begin to wonder about the meaning of life. Did God really put us here on earth just to do the same things over and over and over again? That was a question that the writer in Ecclesiastes was asking himself. He was searching for the meaning of life and faith. Now, the writer was writing during the reign of the Persian Empire, and it was a big place. The Persian Empire extended from the north border of Egypt up into Syria and Lebanon and all the way over to India. It was a big place. And it's likely that the writer was a king or a governor of one of those territories within the Persian Empire. That meant he governed a region that was filled with all sorts of people, former exiles, Jews, Gentiles, people of all races, ethnicities, beliefs, and nationalities. And as the governor, fortunately, the writer had enough wealth and power to actually enjoy some leisure time. And that meant he had time to think. And he found himself asking the age-old question, first sung by Peggy Lee, is that all there is? The writer was looking for the purpose of life, for the purpose of work, for the purpose of faith. He had worked hard enough to achieve every success he wanted, accumulate every bit of stuff that he could, and undertake every type of experience to the known world. And in his writing, he came to the abrupt realization that all of those things were temporary. In fact, all of his stuff, all of his accomplishments, all of his experiences, he called vanity, which at the time meant gone with a puff of wind. Isn't that a great description of vanity? Gone with a puff of wind. And he kept asking himself, was that all there was? Well, isn't that just perfectly gloomy sounding? And yes, the book of Ecclesiastes can sound a bit gloomy. Even so, in the midst of the gloom, Ecclesiastes offers some wisdom and advice. And here's what the writer came to realize. We may never know the purpose of life, and that's okay. Because as long as we are connected to God, we don't need to know the purpose of life. As long as we are closely connected with God, we can enjoy our work, we can enjoy our food, our entertainment, nature, and everything in life because we do it with and for our God. And with God, everything in life has purpose and meaning and can be filled with that deep-seated joy. The secret to enjoying life, the secret to being satisfied for the writer was his connection with God. Now that makes sense. And there are times in life when each of us is keenly aware of God's presence and our connection with God. And some days we feel really close to God, and then life makes perfect sense. But Then we get into the day after day slog, the week after week repetition, the event after event, and feeling after feeling. And sometimes we just don't have enough energy left over to think about God, much less feel how close God really is. And sometimes it feels like we're just spinning our wheels and not making much progress. I mean, let's face it, the 1000th time we're solving the same math homework problem, we may begin to wonder why. The 1000th time we're answering the same question we've answered time after time after, we may begin to wonder why. The 1000th time we're in the car waiting to taxi the kids or the grandkids from one place to the next, we may begin to wonder why. And the 1000th time we're sitting in church, repeating the same familiar prayer, singing the same old songs, and listening to the same old sermon again, we may begin to wonder why. Is that all there is? Well, Ecclesiastes says no. In fact, Ecclesiastes said life is so much more than doing the same thing over and over and over again. That life filled with God is full of joy and meaning and purpose. And that comes when we are aware that God is present in the midst of all of it. In a life that is sometimes, let's face it, filled with repetition, how can we be aware of God's presence? I mean, most of us aren't very good at it. Sometimes we're way too excited or way too sad to experience God. And so how, in the midst of everyday life, do we stay connected with God? Well, being aware of God's presence can be done using a technique called mindfulness. Now, mindfulness is the 21st century term that we used to call living in the moment. When we focus on what we're doing, on what we're thinking and what we're feeling, and how our bodies are reacting to the moment, we are being mindful. We are living in the moment. And while that sounds perfectly easy, it really isn't. That's why most of us can talk fairly well about being mindful or living in the moment, but we're not good at it at all. In fact, most of us live either in before or next. And when we live in before, we think about what happened and how we felt about that at that time. And often it comes back to, what words do we wish we could take back? Or what words do we wish we had said in the moment that would have been so good, but we only thought of them now? We often think about what should we have done differently. And a lot of us spend a lot of time thinking about before. And the rest of us, if we're not thinking about before, we think about next. We think about everything that needs to get done. In fact, before the 8:30 hour, I was talking about why we have to do things at the crack of dawn. We could worship just as well at noon. And several people said, yeah, but then we couldn't get it out of the way. It's nothing new. I've heard that so many times before. I mean, I like to do worship early so I can get on to the rest of my day. Okay. You know, because I've got things to do. I can't just be here all the time, and if I was here at noon, it would interrupt everything. What a special feeling deep inside. But how many of us have that feeling? If I could just get this done, I could get on to the rest of my day. And how many of us spend time right where we are thinking about, okay, when I go to the grocery store, let's see, should I go to the Pig because it's close? Or should I go to Festival? Or should I go to Aldi's? And when I do, what's going to be on my list? My mom used to make grocery lists during the sermon. Oh, I know. Yeah. But who of us has not done that? We think about what comes next. Some of us think about lists, some of us think about the next meal, some of us think about spring training and opening day at Miller Park. We often think about anything and everything except what we're doing right now, which means living in the moment. Mindfulness takes practice. Living in the moment means spending time thinking about what we're doing right now, because when we give our full attention to what we are doing right now, we experience things in a very different way. When we focus on the details, the little things of what we're doing, God's presence becomes so much clearer. Cooking becomes an exercise in appreciating the food that we're cooking, the texture of the vegetable, the life of the animal that we are now getting ready to cook, how we're moving our utensils, the fact that we have electricity or natural gas. We become focused on all of those blessings that we have. Eating becomes an experience in flavor, actually chewing, and gratitude for all those who prepared the food from field to table. How many of us have eaten meals and not tasted a thing? Because we're so busy thinking about something else. Or with so many people and so much hubbub and so much clutter that we don't even focus on the food. We just shovel in calories. Or, for some of us, in the end of the evening, we just pile in mindless calories because it's something to do with our hands and our mouths. That's one of my favorite activities. Yeah. But eating becomes the experience of the actual thing that God has given us. Cleaning, my least favorite activity, becomes an awareness of all of the people, all of the critters, and all of the energy in that place, not to mention all of the things that we have been blessed with and where they came from. Our jobs actually become truly important rather than just a means of getting a paycheck. Living in the moment means letting our thoughts and our feelings pass through our minds without judgment. And who does that? How many times have we had a thought and said, boy, that was stupid? Or had a thought and said to ourselves, I shouldn't be thinking that. Or had a thought and said, boy, I wish I could think that again, that was nice. But instead, letting our thoughts and our feelings pass through our minds without judgment. They're simply there. Or having an awareness of what's going on with our bodies. What aches? What hurts? What's tense? Can we actually relax? Because the more we settle into the moment, the more we become aware of God's presence. The more we can let our thoughts float through without judgment, the more God actually has room to speak to us, to be present to us. But when we keep our heads so filled with stuff, and we're focusing on what happened and what's coming next, God has no room to move. It's blocking God out. Being mindful and living in the moment is why I invite us to take 3 deep breaths before worship. Because when we're taking a deep breath, we can't focus on anything except taking a deep breath. Have you noticed that? When we take a deep breath, the only thing we can think about is that deep breath, and God actually has room to move into our heads and into our experience. When we let all of those things happen, our thoughts and our feelings flow through our brains, when we focus on just breathing in that moment, when we become aware of how our bodies feel, we might actually have the opportunity to notice God's presence. See, the writer of Ecclesiastes experienced God's presence and found actual joy when he lived in the moment. He could focus on his food because he saw it and he tasted it and he recognized what a blessing it was. He focused on his work and he could enjoy it because he was working for God. He could enjoy life because he focused on every moment. In fact, in Ecclesiastes, it's where the phrase, eat, drink, and be merry, for tomorrow you may die, comes from. It's the focus on God. Eat. Enjoy the bounty that God has given us. Enjoy a beverage, not too many. Enjoy a beverage. And enjoy that because it's a blessing from God. Enjoy the moment. Enjoy the conversation. Enjoy the ability to do an activity because it's all a blessing from God. And the writer became aware that there was actually a season for everything and a time for every purpose under heaven. See, when we live in the moment without living in the past or thinking about the future, we can actually experience God in every season and every activity. And maybe, just maybe, that's the ingredient we can add to the new year. So that the new year really is new. Living in the moment. We can add that to the list of ingredients. And if it helps, take 3 deep breaths every now and then, where all we do is focus on breathing. Because as we breathe, as we focus on the moment, we actually open ourselves to God's presence. And when we live in the presence of God, making that next circle around the sun is a journey that's filled with joy and new and meaningful things. May our New Year's be those in which we can enjoy the moment and know that God is present. Amen.
Amen.